I stared at the cream envelope in my hands, the expensive paper feeling like it might burn through my fingertips. 20 years of silence shattered by a Christmas invitation. 20 years of building myself from nothing to a $60 million empire, and now they wanted back in my life. The return address was from the same house I'd been kicked out of at 18, my parents' handwriting unmistakable even after all this time. The timing was no coincidence. 3 days earlier, my face had been plastered across national television, my success story featured on America's leading business program. Now, suddenly, Jack and Laura Thompson remembered they had a son. I laughed bitterly, wondering what would shock everyone more at Christmas dinner. My appearance after being treated like a ghost for 2 decades, or what I planned to say when I finally faced the people who abandoned me during my darkest moments. Growing up in Mapleton, Ohio, population 12,000, I had what most would consider a picture-perfect childhood. My father, Jack, ran the town's only law firm, a family business passed down through 3 generations. My mother, Laura, taught English at the local high school. We lived in a sprawling colonial on Sycamore Street, the kind of home that hosted neighborhood barbecues and appeared on the town's Christmas light tour every December. My earliest memories revolve around business ideas. While other 8-year-olds collected baseball cards, I set up lemonade stands with tiered pricing models. At 12, I was mowing lawns and reinvesting profits into better equipment. By 15, I had 5 neighborhood kids working under me in what my father jokingly called Magnus Enterprises. "You've got the mind for business," Dad would say, ruffling my hair. "Just like your grandfather. But first, you'll get your law degree like every Thompson man before you. Then you can handle the business side of the firm." That was always the plan. The Thompson men went to law school. Period. I nodded along for years, even as I spent nights researching business schools and startup funding. I kept a journal of business ideas under my mattress, afraid to voice my true dreams. My parents weren't bad people. They loved me, supported my school activities, and provided everything I needed. But their vision for my future was carved in stone, unmovable as the mountains. The summer after high school graduation, just before my 18th birthday, I finally gathered my courage. We were eating pot roast at the dining room table when I cleared my throat. "I've been accepted to Wharton Business School," I announced, pushing the acceptance letter across the table. Full scholarship. The silence was deafening. Dad's fork froze midway to his mouth. "I thought we discussed this," he said finally, voice dangerously quiet. "Northwestern law, like I did, like your grandfather did. I applied to both," I explained. "I got into Northwestern too, but this is what I want. This is who I am." Mom reached for Dad's arm. "Jack, maybe we should discuss this. A Wharton scholarship is quite an achievement." Dad pulled away from her touch. "There's nothing to discuss. He knows the plan. I don't want to be a lawyer," I said. "I never have." What happened next still haunts me. Dad's face transformed, hardening into something I'd never seen before. He stood up, walked to his office, and returned with a checkbook. "How much?" he asked coldly. "What? How much will it cost you to live until you come to your senses? 1 month? 2? Name your price." I shook my head, confused. "I don't want your money. I just want your support." "Support?" He laughed, but it held no humor. "You want to throw away 200 years of family tradition, and you expect support?" "Jack," Mom whispered. "He's just confused." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not confused. This is what I want." Dad wrote a check, tore it from the book, and slid it across the table. $2,000. "You have 24 hours to get out of this house." "You can't be serious," I gasped. "You're 18. An adult making adult decisions," he said, standing up. "You've chosen your path. It doesn't include us." Mom was crying silently now. "Jack, please. Either he follows the Thompson legacy, or he's no longer a Thompson," Dad declared. "Your choice, Magnus." I looked at my mother, silently pleading for her to defend me. She met my eyes briefly, then looked away. "I'll help you pack," was all she said. That night, I loaded my old Ford Taurus with everything I could fit. 2 suitcases of clothes, my laptop, and a box of books. Mom slipped me an extra $220 when Dad wasn't looking, along with a hastily written note. "He'll calm down. Give him time." Dad didn't say goodbye. He stood in his study, back turned to me, as I left the only home I'd ever known. That first night, I parked behind a Walmart, reclined my seat, and tried to sleep as rain pounded against the windshield. I had $2,220 to my name, a full scholarship that wouldn't begin for 2 months, and the crushing realization that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had just severed that connection over a college choice. I cried until there were no tears left, then opened my business ideas journal and started planning. If they thought cutting me off would break me, they had severely underestimated their son. The next 3 years blur together in my memory, a montage of exhaustion and determination. I arrived at Wharton with barely enough money for books. While my classmates partied on weekends, I worked 3 jobs: morning barista at a campus coffee shop, afternoon stockboy at a grocery store, and weekend shifts at a bar near campus. I averaged 4 hours of sleep, maintained a 3.9 GPA, and still found time to develop my first real business concept, an app connecting college students with flexible microjobs in their area. During my sophomore year, I met Tyler Andrews in an entrepreneurship class. He was everything I wasn't: confident, well-connected, and from a wealthy family in Connecticut. For some reason, we clicked immediately. "Your microjob platform idea is brilliant," he told me after I presented it to our class. "But you're thinking too small. This could be nationwide." Tyler became my first real friend since leaving home. He understood my vision and didn't think I was crazy for working myself to exhaustion. Most importantly, he believed in me when nobody else did. My uncle is an angel investor. Tyler mentioned one night as we worked on our business plan in my tiny apartment. He funds startups all the time. "Let me introduce you." 2 weeks later, we were sitting in an upscale Philadelphia restaurant with Tyler's uncle Richard, pitching our concept. I was wearing my only suit, purchased secondhand and slightly too big, but my numbers were solid. By dessert, Richard agreed to invest $50,000 for a 15% stake in our company. "This is it," Tyler said as we celebrated later that night. "We're going to change the world, Magnus." We named the company Flexwork and launched 6 months later. The app connected students with everything from moving help to tech support gigs, taking a small commission from each transaction. Within our first year, we had 20,000 users across 3 campuses. By year 2, we'd expanded to 12 schools and were actually turning a profit. I sent a news clipping about our success to my parents' address. The envelope came back marked "Return to Sender." Still, life was finally looking up. I moved out of my studio apartment into a decent 1-bedroom. Tyler and I rented a small office space. We hired 2 programmers and a marketing person. I even started dating again, meeting a nice girl named Jessica from my advanced marketing class. Then came the day everything imploded. I was reviewing our quarterly financials when I noticed discrepancies. Small amounts missing, expense reports that didn't match receipts. Over 3 months, almost $20,000 had vanished. "Probably just accounting errors," Tyler assured me when I brought it up. "I'll look into it." But something in his expression didn't sit right. That night, I stayed late at the office, going through every transaction myself. What I found made me physically sick. Tyler had been systematically siphoning money since the beginning. Small amounts at first, then larger sums as we grew. But the financial betrayal wasn't what devastated me. In his email, I found communications with my father. They'd been in contact for months. Tyler regularly updated my father on my life, my business, my struggles. The most recent email made my blood run cold. "The money is nearly gone. Another month and he'll have to shut down. You were right, Mr. Thompson. Failure will bring him back to the path you've chosen." My father had found Tyler through Richard, who apparently was a law school connection. He'd convinced Tyler to sabotage our business from within, believing that when I failed, I'd have no choice but to come crawling back and follow the Thompson legacy. When I confronted Tyler the next day, he didn't even deny it. "Your dad made a compelling case," he said, shrugging as if betraying 2 years of friendship meant nothing. "Plus, he paid well, double what I was taking from the company." "We were friends," I whispered, struggling to comprehend the depth of this betrayal. "We were business partners," Tyler corrected, "and I got a better offer." He cleaned out what remained in our business account that afternoon and disappeared. Our investors pulled out when they learned what happened. Flexwork collapsed overnight. Jessica left when I couldn't afford to take her out anymore. Within weeks, I was evicted from my apartment for missing rent. 3 years of nonstop work, gone. I had less money than when I left home, and a failed business on my resume. At 21, I found myself homeless, sleeping on park benches and in public libraries during the day. I never considered calling my parents. Their orchestrated betrayal had made their feelings clear. They didn't want me to succeed on my own terms. They wanted me broken, compliant, and following their plan. I would rather starve than give them that satisfaction. The Philadelphia winter hit early that year. By November, nighttime temperatures dropped below freezing, and I was running out of options. The shelters were overcrowded, and my few remaining friends couldn't risk their own housing situations to take me in. I had been sleeping on the same park bench for 3 nights, using newspapers as insulation inside my thin jacket. On the 4th morning, I woke to someone shaking my shoulder. I jerked awake, instantly defensive, to find a woman in her 40s standing over me. She wore an expensive camel coat and held 2 coffees. "Magnus Thompson?" she asked, offering me one of the cups. I took it cautiously, the warmth painful against my frozen fingers. "Do I know you?" "Cassidy Walsh. You pitched to me at the Philadelphia startup competition last spring. Flexwork, right?" I vaguely remembered her sitting on the panel of judges, asking pointed questions about our revenue model. We hadn't won. That was a different life, I muttered, taking a grateful sip of coffee. "Want to tell me why last year's rising star is sleeping on a bench in Rittenhouse Square?" Something about her direct approach broke through my walls. Maybe it was the coffee, or maybe it was simply having reached the point where I had nothing left to lose. I told her everything: my parents' ultimatum, meeting Tyler, building Flexwork, and the devastating betrayal that left me homeless. Cassidy listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat next to me on the bench. "I was you once," she said quietly. "Different circumstances, same outcome. My family disowned me for being gay. I spent 6 months living in my car in Chicago before catching a break." She handed me a business card. "I run a digital marketing firm downtown. We need an account manager. The pay is decent, and there's a small apartment above my garage. You can use until you get on your feet." I stared at her, suspicious. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "I watched you during that pitch competition," she said. 5 minutes in, I knew you had something special. The judges voted for that trust fund kid with the food delivery app because it was safe. But you saw a problem nobody was addressing and created an elegant solution. She smiled. "Also, I've been following your career. Your business ideas remind me of myself at your age." "You've been watching me?" I asked, feeling uncomfortable. In a non-creepy professional way, she clarified. "I make it my business to keep tabs on promising young entrepreneurs. When Flexwork suddenly folded, I was curious. Finding you here is coincidence, but maybe a fortunate one for both of us. I need someone hungry and smart. You need a second chance." It sounded too good to be true, which made me hesitate. "Here's the deal," Cassidy continued, sensing my reluctance. 3 months probationary period. You work hard. The job becomes permanent. You slack off. We part ways. No hard feelings. The apartment is yours either way for 6 months. I can't have my newest employee sleeping on park benches. "Why are you really doing this?" I pressed. Cassidy stood, straightening her coat. 20 years ago, someone took a chance on me when I had nothing. I'm paying it forward. Plus, I'm a businesswoman. I recognize undervalued assets when I see them. That afternoon, I moved into a modest studio apartment above Cassidy's detached garage. It wasn't fancy, just a bed, small kitchenette, and bathroom, but it was clean, warm, and mine. The next morning, I started at Walsh Digital Marketing as their newest account manager. I expected to be getting coffee and making copies. Instead, Cassidy threw me directly into client work. By the end of my first week, I was managing 2 small accounts. By month 3, I had a full client roster and had received my first promotion. "You have good instincts," Cassidy told me during my performance review. But you need to learn patience. Not every business idea needs to change the world overnight. Under her mentorship, I learned the fundamentals I'd missed while rushing to build Flexwork. Cassidy taught me about sustainable growth, proper financial management, and perhaps most importantly, how to recognize people's true intentions. The business world is full of Tylers, she warned me. People who will smile to your face while calculating how to profit from your downfall. Trust should be earned, not given. For the first time since leaving home, I had stability and mentorship. My one-person studio became a home. I bought real furniture, cooked actual meals, and slowly rebuilt my savings. Most nights, Cassidy and I would share dinner, discussing business strategy or the latest industry trends. She became the family I had lost, offering guidance without controlling my path. During this time, I tried once more to reach out to my parents. I sent a letter detailing my new job, my apartment, and my slowly improving life. I included my phone number and a genuine offer to reconnect. 2 weeks later, the letter returned unopened, just like before. Family is complicated, Cassidy said when she found me staring at the rejected envelope. Some wounds need more time than others to heal. I nodded, tucking the letter away. Maybe some never do. I couldn't have known then just how complicated my family situation truly was, or the shocking discovery waiting for me down the road. 5 years passed at Walsh Digital Marketing. I rose from account manager to director of operations, overseeing our entire client portfolio. Cassidy became more than a mentor. She became family. We celebrated holidays together, shared weekly dinners, and built a friendship based on mutual respect and shared experiences. On my 26th birthday, she presented me with an unexpected gift. "I'm making you a partner," she announced, sliding papers across her dining room table. 20% ownership. You've more than earned it. I was speechless. Cassidy, I can't accept this. You can and you will, she insisted. You've tripled our client base and quadrupled revenue. This company wouldn't be what it is today without you. I signed the papers that night, becoming an official partner in what was now Walsh and Thompson Digital Marketing. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. For the first time, my name was connected to a successful business. Despite my professional success, the hole left by my family remained. Every Christmas and birthday passed unmarked by those who had raised me. I'd moved from the apartment above Cassidy's garage to my own condo downtown. But sometimes the emptiness of those rooms echoed with absences I couldn't fill. On the 5th anniversary of starting at Walsh Digital, I decided to make one more attempt at reconciliation. I sent my parents a business card with my new title, along with a short note expressing hope for healing. I kept my expectations low, which turned out to be wise. Weeks passed with no response. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Magnus Thompson?" An unfamiliar female voice asked when I answered. "Speaking. You don't know me, but I'm Diane Mills. I went to high school with your mom in Mapleton." I sat down, unprepared for this connection to my past. "How did you get my number?" "Your business card. Laura dropped it while getting coffee at the diner." I recognized the name immediately and thought, well, I thought you should know what's happening. "What do you mean?" I asked, suddenly tense. "They're telling everyone you're dead, Magnus." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "They've been saying it for years. According to them, you died in a car accident during your first year of college. There's even a scholarship in your name at the community college." My mind struggled to process this information. Dead? They'd declared me dead rather than admit I'd chosen a different path? "I don't understand," I managed to say. "Neither do I," Diane replied. "But I saw you on the Regional Business Journal cover last month. Unless I'm talking to a ghost, they're lying to everyone in town. I thought you deserved to know." After hanging up, I spent hours researching online. Sure enough, there it was. The Magnus Thompson Memorial Scholarship, established by Jack and Laura Thompson in memory of their son, tragically lost in a 21 car accident. The description praised my commitment to community and promising future in law, a future that had never been mine. The discovery left me reeling. Being disowned was one thing. Being fictitiously buried was another level of rejection entirely. They had erased not just my choices, but my very existence. That night, I made a decision that would define the next phase of my life. If my parents wanted to declare me dead, I would build something so significant they couldn't ignore the ghost of their son. I'd been developing a side project for 2 years, specialized software that used artificial intelligence to optimize digital marketing campaigns across platforms. While continuing my partnership with Cassidy, I secured a small business loan and launched Thompson Technologies. The software, which I named MarketMind, quickly gained attention for delivering results that outperformed industry standards by 30%. Within 18 months, we had licensing agreements with 3 major advertising agencies. By year 3, Thompson Technologies had 40 employees and offices in Philadelphia and Chicago. MarketMind evolved from a single product into a comprehensive marketing intelligence platform used by companies worldwide. Through it all, I kept sending holiday cards to my parents. Each one returned unopened. Their commitment to my fictional death never wavered, even as my living accomplishments grew. The Magnus Thompson Memorial Scholarship continued funding small-town students, while the real Magnus built an empire that would eventually be impossible to ignore. I never mentioned my family situation to anyone except Cassidy. Professionally, I created the narrative of a self-made entrepreneur without family connections. It wasn't entirely untrue. After all, in my personal life, I dated occasionally, but never allowed relationships to deepen. The betrayals by my parents and Tyler had left scars that made trust difficult. My success accelerated with each passing year. Thompson Technologies expanded internationally, opening offices in London and Singapore. We developed new products, acquired smaller competitors, and established ourselves as innovation leaders in marketing technology. By my 36th birthday, the company valuation hit $60 million. I had done it. The abandoned son sleeping on park benches had built something undeniable. I had proven my parents wrong in every possible way, yet the victory felt hollow. Success meant nothing without someone to share it with. I still had Cassidy, now semi-retired but still my closest friend and advisor. But the family-shaped void remained, a persistent ache beneath the achievements and accolades. I had stopped sending cards years ago, accepting that some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. Then came the television interview that would finally force my parents to acknowledge that their son wasn't just alive, he was thriving. Today we're joined by Magnus Thompson, founder and CEO of Thompson Technologies, recently valued at $60 million. I smiled at the camera, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in my stomach. This was my first national television interview, broadcast to millions of homes across America, including, potentially, a certain house in Mapleton, Ohio. Magnus, your rise has been nothing short of meteoric, the host continued. From a small marketing firm to an international tech powerhouse in just over a decade. What's your secret? Persistence, I answered honestly. And learning that failure is just education in disguise. The interview covered the usual topics: our innovative technology, expansion plans, company culture. I gave polished answers, the result of media training and years of investor presentations. But then came the question I hadn't prepared for. Your company is known for its youth employment initiative, giving opportunities to young people who've been cut off by their families. That's unusual for a tech company. What inspired this focus? I hesitated, aware of the millions watching. For years, I'd kept my personal story separate from my professional brand. But something about this moment felt right for honesty. It comes from personal experience, I said finally. At 18, I was cut off by my parents for choosing business school over law school. I know what it's like to have your support system disappear overnight. Many talented young people face similar situations for various reasons: their sexual orientation, career choices, religious differences. They deserve a chance to succeed on their own terms. The host leaned forward, sensing a story. So, your parents disagreed with your career path and disowned you? They had a specific future planned for me that I couldn't fulfill, I explained carefully. When I chose my own path, they chose to end our relationship. And now that you've built this empire, have they reached out to reconcile? I smiled tightly. We haven't spoken in 20 years. Not even after your success? Success doesn't heal all wounds, I replied, but it does validate the choices that led here. The interview moved on to safer topics, but I knew that brief exchange had changed everything. I had publicly acknowledged the estrangement for the first time. There would be no going back. 3 days later, the cream envelope arrived at my office, the first communication from my parents that hadn't been returned unopened in 2 decades. The invitation was formal, printed on expensive cardstock. Jack and Laura Thompson request the pleasure of your company for Christmas dinner. December 25th, 4 p.m. Below the printed text, my mother had added a handwritten note. We've always been so proud of you, Magnus. Please come home. I stared at those words, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Proud? They had spent 20 years pretending I was dead. Now, after seeing me on national television, they wanted me home, a concept that had long ceased to include them. For weeks, I debated whether to accept the invitation. Cassidy advised caution. People don't change overnight, she warned. Their sudden interest after your television appearance seems convenient at best, calculated at worst. Maybe they regret what happened, I suggested, wanting to believe it despite myself. Maybe, she agreed. But remember, you're not the same person who left that house at 18. You don't owe them your presence. I considered ignoring the invitation entirely, but curiosity won out. Why now? What did they want? After 20 years of silence, I needed answers, even if they weren't what I wanted to hear. The day before Christmas, I called the number on the invitation. My mother answered on the second ring, her voice exactly as I remembered. Thompson residence. It's Magnus, I said simply. The silence stretched for several seconds. Then, you're coming? Her voice trembled slightly. Yes, I confirmed. But I'm not staying overnight. And I'll be bringing a friend. Of course, she said quickly. Whatever makes you comfortable, we're just so happy you'll be here. I hung up without further conversation, still uncertain if I was making the right decision. The next day, Christmas morning, I picked up Cassidy and began the long drive to Mapleton, the town I hadn't visited since being forced out 2 decades earlier. You don't have to do this, Cassidy reminded me as we passed the town limits sign. I know, I said, but I need closure, one way or another. The town had barely changed, same storefronts, same town square with its gazebo and ancient oak trees. We drove slowly down Sycamore Street, and there it was. My childhood home, looking exactly as I remembered, right down to the wreath on the front door, and the Christmas lights outlining the porch. Ready? Cassidy asked as I parked in the driveway. I took a deep breath, as I'll ever be. The door opened before we reached it, revealing my mother. She had aged, her once brown hair now silver, new lines mapping her face. She stared at me with wide eyes, one hand pressed to her mouth. Magnus, she whispered. You're really here. I nodded stiffly. This is my friend and business partner, Cassidy Walsh. Mom stepped aside, gesturing us in. Please, come in. Everyone's in the living room. Everyone? I wondered who else would be at this reunion. We followed her through the familiar hallway into the living room, where my father stood before the fireplace. He had grown thinner, almost frail, his imposing presence diminished by time. Next to him stood a young woman I didn't recognize, perhaps in her late 20s. Magnus, Dad said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for coming. The young woman was staring at me with an intensity I couldn't interpret. There was something familiar about her features, something that tugged at my memory. Who's this? I asked, nodding toward her. My mother stepped forward. Magnus, this is Amy, your sister. The shock hit me like a physical blow. Amy? The last time I'd seen my sister, she had been 8 years old, a pigtailed girl waving goodbye from the porch as I drove away. Amy? I repeated, struggling to reconcile this adult woman with the child in my memories. She smiled tentatively. Hey, big brother! And suddenly, I was engulfed in her embrace, her arms wrapping tightly around me as if afraid I might disappear again. I stood frozen for a moment, before awkwardly returning the hug. When she stepped back, I noticed tears in her eyes. I've missed you so much. I missed you too, I admitted, surprised by how true it was. In all the hurt and anger toward my parents, I had tried not to think about the little sister left behind. Dad cleared his throat. Please, sit down. We have so much to talk about. I remained standing. Yes, we do. Starting with why you're suddenly interested in my existence after telling everyone I was dead for 20 years. The room fell silent. Amy looked shocked, glancing between our parents and me. They told you I was dead? I asked her. She shook her head. No, they told me you were following your dreams and couldn't come home, but they never said you were gone forever. We just didn't talk about you much. I turned to my parents. Want to explain the Magnus Thompson Memorial Scholarship? Or why every holiday card and letter I sent came back marked "Return to sender"? My father slumped onto the sofa, suddenly looking every bit his age. We need to tell him everything, he said to my mother. All of it. She nodded, tears forming. You deserve the truth, Magnus. But it's not what you think. I gestured for her to continue, maintaining my emotional distance despite the turmoil inside. Whatever revelations awaited, I knew they would change everything I thought I understood about the past 20 years and potentially my future. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly in the silence, each second stretching painfully as my parents exchanged glances, seeming to decide who would speak first. Sit down, please, my father finally said. This is going to take some time. Reluctantly, I took a seat on the edge of the armchair, Cassidy standing supportively behind me. My mother poured coffee from a silver service on the side table, her hands trembling slightly. Amy perched on the arm of the sofa, looking like she might bolt at any moment. It wasn't about law school, Dad began abruptly. That was just convenient timing. Then what was it about? I demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, you threw away your son over a college choice. He shook his head, looking down at his hands. About 6 months before you graduated high school, the firm was struggling. Several major clients had left, and we were facing bankruptcy. I made a terrible decision. My mother reached for his hand, squeezing it encouragingly. I borrowed money, he continued, from people I shouldn't have. People who didn't care about legal contracts or reasonable interest rates. Loan sharks? I asked incredulously. Worse, the Donovan family. They controlled most of the illegal operations in this part of Ohio. Gambling, drugs, protection rackets. I borrowed $300,000 to keep the firm afloat, thinking I could pay it back quickly when things improved. I stared at him, struggling to reconcile this revelation with the straight-laced attorney I'd grown up with. Things didn't improve, he continued. And when I couldn't make the payments, they started making threats, not just against me, but against all of us. You, your mother, 8-year-old Amy. One night, Mom interjected. Someone broke into the house while we were at dinner. They left photos of you walking to school. Amy at her dance recital. Me shopping at the grocery store. Just to show they were watching us. So what does this have to do with cutting me off? I asked, still not seeing the connection. My father's eyes met mine directly for the first time. They gave me an ultimatum. They said they'd forgive the debt if I did something for them, use the firm to launder money. I refused. That's when they escalated the threats, specifically against you children. A man approached me in the school parking lot, Mom said quietly. He described exactly what you were wearing that day. Mentioned how smart you were. What colleges you were considering. Then he said it would be a shame if something happened to ruin your promising future. We went to the police, Dad continued. But the Donovans had people everywhere. The detective we spoke to ended up dead 2 days later. That's when Frank Donovan himself came to see me. I noticed Amy was crying silently now, clearly having heard this story before. He offered a deal, Dad said, his voice now barely above a whisper. He would cancel the debt and leave our family alone under 2 conditions. First, that I quietly close certain cases that might impact their operations. And second, his voice broke. Second, Mom continued, that we completely cut ties with you, send you away, and never contact you again. Why? I asked, genuinely confused. What possible reason would they have for that? Your internship, the previous summer, Dad explained. At the district attorney's office, you had inadvertently accessed files related to an ongoing investigation into the Donovan family. Files you weren't supposed to see. They were afraid you knew too much or might eventually connect the dots. I vaguely remembered stumbling across some organized crime files during that internship, though I hadn't paid much attention at the time. So they wanted me gone, I said slowly. And you agreed. They said they would kill you, Magnus, Mom cried. They were explicit about how they would do it. We thought. We thought if we cut ties completely, if you were away at college with no connection to us, they would leave you alone. We had to make it convincing, Dad added. The scholarship story came later, when people kept asking questions. We thought it was safer for everyone that way. And the returned letters? I asked. The decades of silence? They watched us for years, Mom explained. Any contact would have put you in danger. Even after Frank Donovan died 5 years ago, his sons took over. The threat remained. I sat back, trying to absorb this information. Was it possible? Could their apparent cruelty have been an attempt to protect me? Or was this an elaborate justification created after seeing my success? Why now? I asked finally. What changed? My parents exchanged another glance. The Donovan organization collapsed last year, Dad said. A major federal investigation took down the entire operation. The sons, the lieutenants, all of them. Something clicked in my memory. Last year, Thompson Technologies had provided specialized data analysis software to a federal task force investigating organized crime in the Midwest. I had no idea the targets had been the very people threatening my family. You helped bring them down, Amy said softly. Your technology was mentioned in the news reports about the investigation. The irony is, you destroyed the people who separated us without even knowing it. I looked at her, really seeing her for the first time. And where do you fit into all this? You were just a child when I left. Amy straightened her shoulders. I never believed the stories. Even as a kid, I knew something wasn't right. When I got older, I started researching you, following your career online. She became obsessed, Mom added with a sad smile. Every article, every mention of Thompson Technologies, she collected them all. Amy nodded. 3 years ago, I applied to work at your company under my married name, Amy Winters. I wanted to know my brother, even if I couldn't tell you who I was. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. You're Amy Winters, my executive assistant? She nodded, tears streaming freely now. I've been working for you for 3 years, getting to know you the only way I could. I was terrified you'd recognize me somehow. But you never did. How could you? I was just a little girl when you left. I felt like the room was spinning. My sister had been right beside me for 3 years, managing my calendar, sitting in meetings, bringing me coffee every morning, and I had never suspected a thing. Does that mean? I started, connecting more dots. Yes, she confirmed. I'm the one who made sure your invitation arrived. When I saw you were coming, I told Mom and Dad it was time for the truth. All of it. I turned to Cassidy, who looked as shocked as I felt. Did you know any of this? She shook her head. Not a word, but it explains a lot. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of these revelations settling heavily around us. Part of me wanted to believe this story, to accept that my parents' abandonment had been an act of desperate protection rather than rejection. Another part remained skeptical, wary of convenient explanations after 20 years of silence. I need some air, I said finally, standing abruptly. I walked out to the back porch, the same porch where I'd spent countless summer evenings as a child. Footsteps behind me announced Amy's presence. She stood beside me, respecting my need for space while offering silent companionship. I know it's a lot, she said eventually, and I'm not asking you to forgive them immediately, or maybe ever, but it's the truth, Magnus. I've lived with this weight my whole life. Why didn't you tell me who you were when you started working for me? I asked. She sighed. I was afraid. Afraid you'd reject me. Afraid of putting you in danger if the Donovans were still watching. Afraid you'd think I was just using our connection for a job. And were you? I couldn't help asking. Amy shook her head firmly. No. I have a master's degree in business administration. I'm good at what I do. But yes, I specifically wanted to work for you. To know my brother. Is that so wrong? I studied her face, seeing echoes of my own features of our parents. No, I admitted. It's not wrong. We stood in silence, watching snowflakes begin to fall in the backyard. "They've suffered too, you know," she said quietly. "Dad never recovered professionally. The firm barely survives. Mom developed anxiety so severe she couldn't teach anymore. They lost one child to protect another, and it broke them." I nodded, not ready to verbalize forgiveness, but beginning to understand the impossible choice they'd faced. "Christmas dinner must be getting cold," I said finally. Amy smiled tentatively. "Mom's been cooking for 2 days. She made all your favorites. At least what she remembers them being." As we turned to go back inside, I realized this confrontation was just the beginning. The truth had been revealed, but what we would build from here, whether reconciliation, cautious reconnection, or permanent separation, remained to be seen. For the first time in 20 years, though, the future contained possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. We gathered around the dining table, an uncomfortable silence settling as my mother brought out a turkey with all the trimmings. It was surreal, sitting in my childhood home, after 20 years, across from parents who had become strangers, beside a sister I knew as my executive assistant. Cassidy squeezed my hand under the table, her presence grounding me. My father cleared his throat, lifting his glass in an awkward toast. "To family reunited," he offered. I didn't raise my glass. "I'm still processing everything," I said honestly. "This doesn't erase 20 years in one afternoon." Dad lowered his glass, nodding. "We understand that, son. Do you?" I challenged, unable to hold back any longer. "Do you understand what it's like to be 18 and suddenly homeless? To sleep on park benches in winter? To build something from nothing while believing your own parents thought you were worthless?" "Magnus," my mother began tearfully. "No," I interrupted. "I need to say this. Maybe you thought you were protecting me. Maybe that's even true. But you destroyed me in the process. Do you know what saved me? Not family. Strangers. Cassidy found me homeless and gave me a chance when you wouldn't even open my letters." The table fell silent. Amy stared at her plate, while my parents looked stricken. "We didn't know how to reach you without putting you at risk," Dad said finally. "We thought a clean break was safest." "For whom?" I challenged. "For me or for you? Because it seems convenient that your solution to the Donovan problem aligned perfectly with your disappointment in my career choice." My father flinched as if I'd struck him. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair," I countered. "But it's reality. My reality for 20 years. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. This wasn't how I wanted this dinner to go. But decades of suppressed emotions were finally finding voice. "I need to tell you something," I said, my tone softening slightly. "The federal investigation that took down the Donovans, I was part of it, though I didn't know the connection to our family. My company developed data analytics software that helped identify their money laundering patterns. We worked directly with the FBI for 18 months. My parents exchanged shocked glances. "You're saying you unknowingly helped eliminate the very threat that separated us?" my father asked. "Ironic, isn't it?" I laughed without humor. "If you'd told me the truth from the beginning, perhaps we could have addressed the real problem together. Instead, you chose secrecy and separation." "We were trying to protect you," Mom insisted. "I know that now," I acknowledged. "But good intentions don't erase 2 decades of abandonment." Amy reached across the table, touching my arm lightly. "We can't change the past, Magnus. But we're here now. All of us." I looked at my sister, this woman who had found her way back to me through determination and courage. She had more reason than anyone to be angry, having grown up in the shadow of family secrets. Yet she had built a bridge instead of a wall. "You're right," I conceded. "We're here now, so let's start with honesty. All cards on the table." My father nodded solemnly. "Ask us anything. No more secrets." Over turkey and stuffing, cranberry sauce and sweet potatoes, we began the painful process of rebuilding. I learned that my parents had followed my career from afar, collecting news clippings and watching my company grow. They described the agony of pretending their son was dead, while privately celebrating each of my successes. Mom explained how she'd leave the room whenever the memorial scholarship was mentioned, unable to bear the charade. They had suffered too differently than I had, but genuinely. Dad's law practice had never recovered. He now handled mostly small-town wills and real estate transfers. Mom had eventually returned to teaching, but at a different school, the anxiety attacks following her. They had lived in a prison of their own making, trapped by fear and regret. As dessert was served, I finally asked the question that had been burning inside me. If the Donovans hadn't been arrested, would you ever have contacted me? My parents exchanged glances. We discussed it constantly, Dad admitted, especially after Frank died. But the sons seemed even more dangerous, more unpredictable. We were paralyzed by fear. Then I saw you on television, Mom added. Heard you talk about being cut off. The pain in your voice. I couldn't bear it anymore. Risk or no risk? It was time. I nodded, accepting their answer without fully embracing it. Some wounds would take more than one dinner to heal. After coffee, we moved to the living room, the conversation shifting to more neutral territory. Amy shared stories about working for me, moments where she'd almost revealed her identity. We laughed at the coincidences and near misses. You hired me because of my qualifications, she assured me. But I stayed because you're an amazing boss and an even better brother, even when you didn't know it. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself at a crossroads. This family broken, imperfect, but mine was offering reconnection. The question was whether I could accept it, with all its complications and painful history. I should go, I said finally, standing. It's a long drive back to Philadelphia. My parents rose as well, uncertainty in their expressions. Will we see you again? Mom asked, her voice small. I considered this carefully before answering. Yes, I decided. But on my terms. We need to rebuild slowly. 20 years doesn't disappear overnight. Whatever you need, Dad agreed quickly. We're just grateful for this chance. I turned to Amy. As for you, Miss Winters, I expect to see you at the office after the holiday. Though we might need to discuss your position. It seems inappropriate for my sister to be fetching my coffee. She grinned. I've been managing half your client relationships anyway. Maybe it's time for an official promotion. Director of Client Services has a nice ring to it, I agreed, surprising myself with how natural this felt, planning a future that included family. Before leaving, I shared one last decision. I'm establishing a new foundation through Thompson Technologies. It will provide support and opportunities for young people who have been cut off by their family's education, housing, mentorship. But it won't be anonymous anymore. I'm calling it the Thompson Family Reconciliation Foundation. My parents' eyes filled with tears at this olive branch. We'd like to contribute, Dad said. Not just money, but time. If you'll let us. I nodded, not quite ready to embrace them, but no longer needing to keep them at arm's length. We'll talk about it. On the drive back to Philadelphia, Cassidy and I dissected the evening, the revelations, the possibilities. What are you thinking? She asked as the miles passed. I'm thinking that family is complicated, I replied, and that sometimes the path forward isn't about forgetting the past, but understanding it differently. Are you going to forgive them? She pressed. I considered this carefully. I'm going to try. Not all at once, but gradually. They made a terrible choice. For what they believed were the right reasons. I can acknowledge that without erasing the consequences. And Amy? Your secret sister divided by executive assistant? At this, I smiled genuinely. Amy, I forgive completely. She found her way back to me against all odds. That takes courage I have to respect. The next morning, I made 2 significant calls. The first was to my legal team, instructing them to establish the foundation immediately, with an initial endowment of $10 million. The second was to Amy, offering her not just a promotion but a partnership position at Thompson Technologies. Are you serious? She gasped. Deadly, I confirmed. You've been doing the work already. Might as well have the title and compensation to match. But what will people say? About nepotism? They'll say I recognize talent and integrity where I found it, I replied. Just like Cassidy did for me, all those years ago. In the months that followed, we rebuilt our family one careful step at a time. Sunday dinners. Holiday gatherings. Difficult conversations about the past and hopeful plans for the future. My parents sold their house in Mapleton and moved to a smaller home near Philadelphia, Close enough for regular visits, but respectful of the boundaries I still needed. The Thompson Family Reconciliation Foundation became my passion project, providing second chances to young people whose families had rejected them for their identities, beliefs, or choices. Each success story healed something in me that I hadn't realized was still broken. 1 year after that first Christmas reunion, we gathered again, not at my parents' house, but at mine, a home finally filled with the family I had missed for so long. As we shared a meal prepared together, I realized that success isn't measured in dollars or company valuations. It's measured in cycles broken, in pain transformed into purpose, in the courage to write a new ending to an old story. My empire had brought my parents back into my life, but it was forgiveness, both given and received, that made us family again. Not perfect, not without scars, but connected by something stronger than the forces that had torn us apart. If you've ever been cut off, rejected, or abandoned by those who should have loved you unconditionally, know this: your worth isn't determined by their inability to see it. Build your life anyway. Create your success on your terms. And if reconciliation eventually becomes possible, approach it not from a place of desperation, but from the strength of the person you've become without them. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about forgiveness? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and redemption, and share with someone who might need to hear that estrangement doesn't have to be the end of the story. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the family we rebuild is stronger than the one we lost.